Osama bin Laden was an infamous figure who committed terrible acts. Therefore, it was not surprising when the CIA examined the hard drives recovered from his hideout and found equally disturbing content. During the thorough investigation of the hard drives, some surprising files were discovered. Now we know that Osama bin Laden watched anime, played video games, and explored some darker aspects of the internet. Be prepared, because the content on this terrorist's hard drive that you are about to uncover will surely shock and outrage you. If you enjoy this type of video, please leave your like. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot to continue with our beloved channel brain outside the box. Now let's get started. On May 2nd, 2011, a group from the United States Navy, known as SEALs, carried out a covert operation at Osama bin Laden's hideout in Abbottabad, Pakistan. During this courageous mission, 5 terrorists, including bin Laden and one of his sons, were neutralized, or rather executed. The Special Forces unit acted with precision as they advanced through the hideout, ensuring that after bin Laden's elimination, his body was removed to be later disposed of at sea. This measure was taken to prevent fanatics from idolizing him. During this mission, the SEAL team recovered several hard drives, flash drives, and computers that contained quite surprising information. The CIA released a significant amount of content from the hard drives to further expand public understanding of al-Qaeda. However, what surprised everyone was the large amount of videos with memes, crochet tutorials, and quite peculiar pornographic content found on Osama bin Laden's hard drives. However, not all of these files were made public, as some were used to track other terrorist leaders, and others were videos of a disturbing nature that were not suitable for release. Can you imagine the content of these videos? In total, approximately 470,000 digital files, totaling 250 gigabytes of data, were extracted from bin Laden's hard drives, and each file was more impressive than the previous one. It would be expected to find information related to terrorism on the hard drive of a terrorist leader, don't you agree? Although the CIA probably hasn't disclosed most of the documentation related to al-Qaeda's plans and activities, they have shared something very interesting. One of the documents found on the hard drives was a recruitment form from al-Qaeda. This may seem strange, as we usually associate recruitment forms with companies or non-profit organizations. It seems that al-Qaeda needed some kind of document to evaluate their recruits. However, unlike any traditional recruitment form, the questions found in al-Qaeda's equivalent were specific to their line of work. Questions like, "Are you willing to carry out a suicide operation?" were mixed with other questions like, "What are your favorite hobbies or pastimes?" It is not clear whether the answers to these questions qualified or disqualified the candidate from becoming a terrorist. But this is just one of the many documents that provide us with an insight into the selection process of al-Qaeda and how the organization was managed. Furthermore, the hard drives also contained videos and speeches by Hamza bin Laden, son of Osama bin Laden, who was believed to assume leadership of al-Qaeda in the event of his father's death or inability to lead the organization. So, documentary images were stored on hard drives for historical purposes. Al-Qaeda also used these videos and images as propaganda to show that Hamza would be a strong leader. The videos on the hard drive seem to contradict this idea. There was a 1-hour wedding video on one of the discs that dragged on and seemed to have no real meaning. Hamza appears with a thin mustache and seems to be relatively dissatisfied throughout the entire event. Wedding images were also used in some terrorist groups' advertisements, but the images were edited to portray Hamza in a positive light. Some of the images and videos stored on the hard drives were likely used to identify and locate Hamza. In 2019, Hamza was killed in an anti-terrorist operation conducted by the United States in an undisclosed location in Afghanistan or Pakistan. The hard drives also contained plans and preparations for the September 11th and ways to use the Arab Spring protests in favor of al-Qaeda. The information on Osama bin Laden's hard drives was not intended for anyone other than al-Qaeda members, as it included details that would allow the United States to interfere with their plans. However, it was other contents in addition to terrorist plots and speeches found on the hard drives that left the teams and authorities even more shocked. Obviously, it's not surprising that Osama bin Laden was a narcissist. Some of the files found on one of the hard drives tell this story almost perfectly. That terrible individual loved documentaries about himself. In fact, his hard drives were filled with programs like CNN's In the Footsteps of Bin Laden and The World's Most Wanted. And it's possible that these programs were downloaded just to keep control over what the US media knew about him. but there was no reason to keep the files after watching them if they were only used for that purpose, right? It's not hard to imagine Osama bin Laden watching documentaries about himself and finding pleasure in them. That's a disgusting thought, but everything indicates that bin Laden was exactly like that. Disgusting. He also had recordings of the 2008 documentary Where is Osama Bin Laden, produced by Morgan Spurlock, the same director as Super Size Me. Perhaps the most intriguing documentary that Osama bin Laden had on his hard drive was Loose Change, which presented the theory that the Pentagon attack was a false flag operation. This means that the September 11th attacks were planned and executed by people within the United States government, based on facts and alleged anomalies observed in the historical record of the attacks. The documentary has been debunked numerous times and has no real evidence or validity. However, it is curious that Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks, had a copy of this documentary on his hard drive. Perhaps it was a reminder of how some people can be naive, or maybe he kept it as a memento, just like all the other documentaries about him. There are several reports that claim bin Laden was a person with mental problems and extremely paranoid. And there were reasons for that, right? After all, the most powerful armed forces in the world were constantly after him. However, one of the files revealed how concerned he was about the possibility of being tracked. In a particular folder of files, there were a series of messages from bin Laden to one of his wives. In one of the messages, he mentioned to his wife that a tracking device had been implanted in his tooth when she went to the dentist in Iran. Osama described the device as being the size of a grain of wheat and as thin as a vermicelli noodle. It is not entirely clear what bin Laden did with this paranoia, but no one doubts that he forced his wife to have the tooth removed. There is no evidence that a tracking device was actually placed in her tooth or if it was even possible at the time. As investigations into Osama bin Laden's hard drives progress, the scenario becomes increasingly intriguing. Surprisingly, a portion of the adult content found in his possession proves to be unusual. Bin Laden had rather peculiar interests, as evidenced by pirated copies of obscure pornography titles originating from old arcade machines on his hard drive. Notable examples include games like Fantasy 95 or Perestroika Girls, in which players were rewarded with simple images of naked or partially dressed women in an anime style as they progressed through the story. These images feature pixelated characters or photographs of naked women in extremely low resolution. While the choice of adult content may seem peculiar, it wouldn't be uncommon for Osama bin Laden to have unique preferences when it came to what intrigued him. Some journalists speculate that pixelated pornography could have been used as a way to transmit coded messages to other members of al-Qaeda. After all, one thing is certain. He was indeed a ruthless man, but he was not naive. Using this type of image as a coded message wouldn't be a bad idea. Bin Laden was wary of sending messages via email, fearing that his location could be traced. He didn't consider it a secure option to communicate with his terrorist organization, especially if the goal was to keep plans away from the knowledge of the United States. Therefore, there are speculations that he may have hidden confidential orders or secret messages among pornographic images or in games on his hard drive. However, some experts suggest an alternative to the large amount of pixelated pornography found in bin Laden's collection. They argue that he could simply enjoy this more rudimentary type of content. Osama bin Laden's preference was not limited to pornography. His hard drives revealed a surprising collection of videos, programs, and movies dating back to around 2007. YouTube meme videos gained great popularity, with Charlie Bit My Finger becoming one of the most famous. Surprisingly, even bin Laden watched this phenomenon. During the analysis of the files on his hard drives, the CIA discovered that bin Laden had downloaded various YouTube videos, including those capturing the essence of popular memes in the United States. The hard drive contained several cat videos, suggesting that bin Laden might have liked these felines or at least found it amusing to watch these videos. Despite the apparent lack of connection to terrorism and memes, it is interesting to note that bin Laden had a variety of videos such as how to make a crochet basket, crochet hat, and rainbow star crochet stitch. This indicates a possible interest or hobby in crochet, probably acquired through online tutorials. Although it is not clear if bin Laden was responsible for these crochet creations, evidence suggests that crochet somehow found its place among the interests of al-Qaeda. One intriguing aspect of the videos on Osama bin Laden's hard drive was a series of educational resources aimed at young children. Could these videos be the tool that bin Laden used to enhance his English skills? Titles such as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, New Fast Alphabet, Phonics Songs, and ABC suggest that bin Laden faced challenges with the alphabet. It is clear that the Arabic alphabet differs significantly from the Latin alphabet, but the videos selected to learn the alphabet did not necessarily have to be children's songs. Or did they have to be? In addition to the documentaries that fed his ego, bin Laden had an interest in other subjects. However, just like the rest of his hard drive, his choices were peculiar. It is possible that bin Laden was seeking negative information about the Christian church, or perhaps he just found the scandals fascinating. An example of this is the documentary titled Sex Crimes and the Vatican, found among the videos. Another file titled How Many Angels Exist could refer to a documentary about the number of angels in heaven. Or perhaps it was just a YouTube video literally explaining how many angels are mentioned in the Quran or other sacred texts. However, no additional information was provided about this video. Osama bin Laden also liked cartoons. On the hard drive, several episodes of Tom and Jerry and even the iconic Pink Panther were found. However, the most intriguing video of all is titled Bubbles. Could it be just someone blowing bubbles? Giving tips on how to produce them, or is it something completely different? Maybe we will never know. In Osama bin Laden's hideout, there was a noticeable presence of anime enthusiasts, as evidenced by the considerable amount of space dedicated to such programs on the hard drives. Although it may be surprising to imagine bin Laden and his terrorist colleagues enjoying anime, the extensive video collection suggests that this practice was common. Among Osama's preferences were titles such as Naruto, Bleach, and Dragon Ball Z, and even games like The Devil May Cry and anime crossovers known only by dedicated fans. The extent of the anime collection present on the hard drives is impressive. This revelation also highlights the widespread practice of copyright infringement by al-Qaeda involving the piracy of protected materials. Although copyright infringement was probably not the primary concern of a terrorist organization, the large number of files indicates a significant investment of time and effort in the illegal acquisition of anime videos and other digital content. It is unclear whether this initiative was prompted by a request from Osama bin Laden or if a member of the organization decided to stock the discs with anime. However, what is certain is that the abundance of files suggests regular consumption. Despite the animosity declared by the Western world, bin Laden had a collection of various Hollywood successes. Animations such as Ants, Cars, Ice Age, and Chicken Little were found, as well as action movies like Resident Evil, The Three Musketeers, and Batman. Although they may have been for research purposes, it is more likely that Osama bin Laden and his admired terrorists simply enjoyed films from the part of the world they considered as their enemy. How do we explain this admiration that bin Laden had for the West, especially the United States? Considering the circumstances of his hideout, where there was a constant threat of U.S. drones and operatives, bin Laden needed a variety of entertainment options. And what better way to pass the time than to immerse himself for hours in video games? With emulators present on hard drives and files associated with Nintendo DS classics like Mario and Luigi, Partners in Time, New Super Mario Bros., Metroid Prime Hunters, and Yoshi's Island DS. However, his preference was not limited to casual Nintendo games. GTA, Chinatown Wars, a more intense game that aligned with bin Laden's personality, was also present in his files. One can imagine bin Laden playing late into the night, trying to escape from the police and causing virtual chaos. Unfortunately for him, his escape in the real world was not successful, and the SEAL Team 6 ensured that he would no longer pose a threat. Furthermore, Counter-Strike, a first-person shooter game that requires an internet connection for multiplayer matches, was also installed. This leaves room for speculation about which team Osama and his colleagues preferred. Not to mention that this game provides the opportunity for you to play with anyone from around the world. If you're a fan of Counter-Strike, just know that you may have already faced one of the world's worst terrorists, and you may have defeated him or not, right? Jokes aside, it is possible that bin Laden and his team set up their own local network, LAN, to play only among themselves. After all, what would be the interest in playing with people from other countries? The terrorist group had no intention of being traced. Therefore, creating a well-structured LAN with well-installed security systems would be the most sensible measure. And surely that was done. So forget about the possibility of ever personally facing al-Qaeda in Counter-Strike. In addition to the mentioned video games, it seems that a decent amount of time was dedicated to playing Zuma Deluxe, To pass the time, it is worth remembering that around 2007, these types of games were popular. It is interesting to note that Osama and his group in hiding seemed quite up to date with their gaming practices. These men also dedicated some time to playing Sniper Elite, Nazi Zombie Army 2, where they would eliminate zombies. Even as bloodthirsty terrorists, apparently, they also enjoyed Nintendo as much as any shooting game enthusiast. Alongside video games, pornography, and other content, a large amount of documents was stored on the disks. The important documents for national security reasons were never publicly released. However, it is reasonable to assume that some of these files played a role in the capture or elimination of other al-Qaeda members. Furthermore, it is plausible that photos and videos of torture and executions may not have been released to the public. It is important to remember that Osama bin Laden and his associates were dreadful individuals, perpetrators of unspeakable acts. Playing some games or watching videos on Osama's hard drive should not overshadow the fact that bin Laden was a terrorist responsible for countless deaths, transcending human condition to assume a monstrous character. On Osama bin Laden's hard drives, drafts of emails were also found, providing information about his activities during the years he was in hiding. Due to concerns about interception by U.S. intelligence, bin Laden could not send emails or make phone calls directly from his location. Instead, he would draft emails that were transferred to pen drives given to messengers and sent via email from different internet cafes to preserve the secrecy of his location. The most surprising discovery from these emails was that even while in hiding, Osama bin Laden was still commanding al-Qaeda. Although he remained a central figure while in hiding, he had to share some of his power with his second-in-command, Ayman al-Zawahiri. The files found on Osama's hard drives indicated that he was still giving orders, receiving reports, and making religious decisions within the terrorist organization, despite being isolated. During the operation that resulted in the neutralization of Osama bin Laden, the SEAL Team 6 obtained several valuable pieces of information from the hideout. Although the exact composition of the population residing there is uncertain, reports indicate the presence of at least some of his wives and several children during the operation. This raises an important consideration. While the recovered hard drives may contain files that were used by Osama at some point, it is possible that these devices were also used by other members of his family or by the soldiers who shared the hideout with him. Therefore, it is likely that the movies, TV shows, video games, and adult content were not solely associated with Osama bin Laden. However, regardless of this, it is almost certain that he was aware of the content present on the disks, and most of the stored entertainment was probably for his own enjoyment or to keep himself occupied. Additionally, digital elements composed the backdrop of the hideout. Bin Laden maintained a peculiar collection of books that offered a deeper perspective into his thinking. Surprisingly, Osama's library included several works about the United States, demonstrating an interest in the country's diplomatic strategies. Books like Obama's Wars by Bob Woodward, Necessary Illusions, Thought Control in Democratic Societies by Noam Chomsky, and The United States and Vietnam, 1787-1941 by Robert Hopkins Miller reflect this focus. These readings probably helped bin Laden understand his enemy and develop new strategies to intimidate the free world. However, the question arises, if bin Laden was so opposed to the United States and the Western world, why did he have so much media content from these cultures in his hard drives? Why weren't his drives filled with movies, shows, and games from other regions of the world, or even from the Middle East? That's all for today, but check out yesterday's video and others available on our channel. Binge watch several, or wait for the upcoming video. That's it, folks. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.